So first, I'll introduce myself, and then I'll let Nadja introduce herself as well. So my name is Neal Strauss. I am one of the Upwork ambassadors to the United States. I am also a top-rated social media strategist, freelancer, and I've been freelancing for about 7 years now, and through Upwork for about 5 years. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to Nadja.
Thank you, Neal, and thank you for having me join this event. It's my pleasure. So I have a background in talent experience and recruitment, and I've been primarily working with remote teams. So I stepped into the role of a success partner here in Upwork about 2 years ago. And currently there's 4 success partners here. And what we do is we provide these one-on-one personalized coaching services to help our talent grow their business on Upwork. And basically the way we do it is that we kind of provide a custom set of reviews and coaching to people who kind of either have certain challenges and we kind of tackle those challenges, or just, based on whatever our talent interest is. And one of the things that we do with our talent is the profile review, which we're going to show a little bit in this event later on. I think you're muted, Neal. Great.
Thank you. Always a little trouble with technology there, but no,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us, Nadja. I am personally super excited. I think profiles are one of those areas, especially with freelancers profiles, where there's always room for improvement. And as you go throughout the
Definitely.
year, and as you grow, and as you change your own freelance business, there's always a lot of new opportunities to adjust and optimize your profile.
Yes, I
Um,
totally agree.
yeah, so with that, this is Nadja kind of alluded to this a little bit, but this is our schedule for today. We're going to start out with some best practices, and then we'll review some of the profiles that people submitted before this webinar, and Nadja will take us through how people can improve, some changes they may be able to make to certain sections of the profiles. And then finally, we'll end up with a Q&A. So again, head over to Slido for that to submit your questions there. I see a couple of questions have already come in. We'll get to those towards the end of this webinar, but please feel free to keep them coming. So with that, let's do our first poll of the day. So again, you can answer this via Slido, but what is the first thing that most clients look at on a freelancer's profile? And I would love to get some of your opinions on this to see where our knowledge base is at so far. So again, you could head on over to slido.com and start typing in some of your answers there. Awesome. So it looks like we've got a lot coming in here so far.
Yeah.
Nadja, what do you think of these answers?
Well, they're great. I mean, clients definitely do look at all of these things. And I definitely believe that it's kind of a combo of what we're seeing here. So some of the things that, clients mostly focus on would be your picture, your title, maybe, snippets of your, or the beginning of your overview, just because these are the things that actually appear in search results together with your job success score and your talent badges if you have them. Obviously, if clients have a set budget for their project, this is, your hourly rate is something that they will take into consideration. But my personal opinion is that they don't focus on this as much as the rest of the sections, so that they can really understand what your expertise is. And you're the one who kind of showcases your value throughout your profile, and then some other things as well, such as your proposals or the way you even communicate in an interview. What do you think, Neal?
I actually like how a couple of these popped up of picture, price, and
Yeah.
title, as those are the ones that I think the most people started submitting. I think those are super important. And I think those really grab a lot of people's attention. and a lot of clients' attention. But after that, that's really just what grabs their attention. What they're really looking for afterwards
Yes,
is the overview for some of those reviews and the portfolio items. Like you said, they really
exactly.
want to see the experience there. And it's, it's one thing to grab their attention, but then you got to have the rest of your profile completed to really keep them there.
Exactly, exactly. This is just something that kind of grabs the attention. So the client would open the profile. And then from that point on, it's really about showcasing your experience throughout the variety of profile sections, right? In some cases, the overview, in general, I think overview is a really important section of the profile. But then let's say, if your work is visual, you really want to have that great portfolio there, right?
Mhm. Very true. So with that, I do have a couple of questions for you, Nadia, about
Sure.
profile best practices.
Okay.
So as a talent success partner, what are the top three tips that you'd recommend to better stand out or to show up in more search results on Upwork?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And we do get asked that quite a bit. So I'd say to really make sure to focus on skill tags as a section of your profile and to pick all 15 that you can. And also to make sure that you have relevant keywords throughout all of your profile sections so that you can really show up in these search results, right? Another thing would be to try to put yourself in client's shoes and to think a little bit more about what keywords would client use when actually searching for talent. In addition to that, did you want to say something, Neil?
No, 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 go for it. That's
Okay.
the client shoes is one of those that I personally have used throughout. Of
Yeah.
sometimes things make sense to me, but that's not always the way the client's thinking.
Exactly. So it's always good to kind of put yourself in client's shoes and try to think about your profile from that perspective. Um, and speaking of that, it's always great to create at least one specialized profile if you can, just because we actually found that people who do create at least one specialized profile can see, I think, about a 33% increase in invites and then a 31% increase in interview requests, as well as a 9% increase in offers. So this is really important because clients, when they kind of filter out by specialty, right, you're going to come up in search results only if you have the specialized profile. So this is a little bit of a fun fact. And then speaking of this type of visibility, not necessarily related to the search results, but I would say that, talent should create catalog projects to actually gain more visibility because it's a different channel for clients to find them.
Interesting. And so, I mean, with that, as you get more of those interviews and hopefully projects later on, what's the best way to show some of that work and that work history, whether it is through the portfolio or work that you have had before you started freelancing?
Okay, well, there are a couple of ways you can do that. First off, you can definitely mention some of this in your overview, but I would focus most of it in the employment history section. So I know that sometimes talent kind of get confused about the term employment history. So it doesn't necessarily have to be employment history only. It can also be about your independent professional business. So you can either list it as a one-line item, or what you can do is you can list a few major, larger projects that you worked on and kind of add a couple of details about what your accomplishment was or what the project was about. Another great way to do this is to kind of to keep your portfolio up to date and to connect it to your work history. So the projects that you worked on Upwork. And as I mentioned, Project Catalog can be an additional great way to just showcase what your methodology and way of working is.
Okay. And so, I mean, for me, the portfolio section seems pretty relevant as someone that's more of in a marketing category. And I would assume for design as well, but is the portfolio section really relevant for everyone, even if they're not in some of those design or visually appealing categories?
I'd say yes. So if your work is visual, this is probably one of the first sections clients are going to check, obviously. But even if not, there's a classic or case study template that you can use to showcase again what your methodology or processes when you work. And so I definitely recommend to try to include at least a couple of examples of your work. And I feel like even if your work is not visual, you can get even more creative with how you really want to present those skills and projects that you worked on. But if for some reason you have the experience that client doesn't normally request a portfolio, then in that case, you can feel free to leave it out. Although I do think it's a great addition to your profile and makes it look a little bit fuller and more professional.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That I feel like that was a good overview and kind of got me ready for this next section here.
Yeah.
But for this, I'd love to turn it over to you, Nadia, to go over some of our submissions for profiles.
Yeah, and before we start with that, I just want to take time to thank everyone who submitted their profiles for review. There were so many that obviously I had to pick a few to showcase it here. And Neal, I'd love to take the opportunity to thank you for sharing your profile with us so that we can show it here. Now that we're kind of looking at your profile here, and when I was reviewing it, I did have just a few questions for you. I was really curious about maybe, what was your biggest challenge when you started working and started creating your profile?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was a little overwhelming at first. There was like a million places to start, and it was kind of like when I looked at it, I like froze up. I didn't know what to do. And I'll be honest, it took me a week to kind of like reset myself and be like, all right, this is worth it. Like if I really want to do this, I got to put in the effort. But after that, I think for me, it was the overview section. Once it really came down to it, since a profile picture, a headshot, that seemed kind of easy. Same with the title, it was more of a simple approach to it. But when it came to the overview, I started writing out once, and it felt almost like I just was vomiting out words. I just kept adding way too many in there. And then that was one thing I started doing when I like took a step back a few weeks later and I looked at it from a client's perspective. I kind of realized none of this really makes sense. I'm adding a lot of information here, but is this really
Yeah.
what they want to get at, or are they looking for something completely different? And so that's also why I then started like sharing it around to other people to get ideas and feedback, so I could really more of get that perspective of what would a client look at, and what would attract
Perfect.
them.
This is a great response. And I am curious to understand just a little bit more about this process you had. So how did you end up actually, starting to think about this client perspective? Was it that you maybe weren't getting as many invites or responses from clients that, as you were hoping for? Or did you have a client actually, share this type of feedback with you? So how did you get to this point of kind of putting yourself in clients' shoes and thinking about your overview from that perspective?
Yeah, so it actually started when I wasn't getting many invites at all, but when I would submit proposals and clients would mention how they took a look at my profile, and that's why they think I'd be great for this, or why they didn't think I was a perfect fit for their job. And I started to realize the more they said, like, oh, it's after I looked at your profile, or I was reading about this about you, and I was like, huh, that's not what I was trying to convey at all. So it's interesting that they thought that, and that's what really made me take that step back and start to say, okay,
Yeah,
how is this actually coming across to other people? And is there a
yeah.
different way or a better way I could be doing it?
Yeah, well, that's a great story, and I think this is why we kind of have to highlight the importance of trying to view your profile from the client perspective. And if obviously you think it's not enough, maybe you can ask like a friend or a colleague to take a look at it and to share some feedback. But what this I think really means is that the profile doesn't have to be perfect for you to be successful, but it is important that as you kind of evolve and grow your reputation, you do try to improve your profile over time. And so I noticed, and I really love that you have two specialized profiles, and this is really helpful. So I was just wondering, how did you decide on what to include in your general profile and then what to include in your specialized profiles?
Yeah, so I thought of it similar to how I view my profile in general, where if we're going back to our previous conversation, where the picture and the title are to kind of grab you in and to grab
Hmm.
someone's attention, what do you do next? And so I thought of that similar to when I was looking at my profiles, where, yeah, I could do social media and a lot of digital marketing, but then how do I talk about the social media strategy that I can offer, the social media management and the content strategy pieces? And so those were also
Hmm.
parts that, again, when I started to add them to my profile, those were the pieces that I thought were distracting from that main message. And so that's when, I'll be honest, at first, I only created one specialized profile because I wasn't sure that I really had content strategy or that offering more of nailed down and at a place
Hmm.
where I thought I could really focus it and specialize it for others to see. And so that's why it did take me some time and it was playing around. I think content strategy was my second or third real try at creating a second specialized profile. But it was one of those things where, as it developed more and as I talked to more clients and I really tapped into my network of friends and previous employers to get their perspective and see, what would really attract you or what would stand out to you. And at first, I think I actually did social media management and social media strategy as two different specialized profiles. But
Hmm.
that was one of those learnings that once I turned it over to someone else or asked someone else for their advice, that's when they pointed out that these are very similar, and to me, I view them as the same thing. So I would instead go a different route,
Yeah.
which is incredible advice, and I'm still trying to change it and still trying to fix it up. I feel like every time I look at it, there's another improvement or another idea that I think of.
Yeah. Well, this is a great learning, and I feel like with people who have multiple fields of expertise, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to decide which specialized profiles to go for. Just because at this point you can have one general profile and then two specialized profiles. But I feel like, it's always important to think about, do I want to offer these services here on Upwork? Is this something that I want to focus on? So a little bit more about, obviously, what you are interested in and what kind of, where you want to grow and where you see yourself maybe in a few months or a few years. And the best thing about this is that you can always change as you kind of grow, and you can switch the specialized profiles and evolve your offering. But I think this really kind of bottles down to what works for you might not necessarily work for everyone. And it's really kind of, I feel with your profile especially, it's important to showcase a little bit of that personality and your own brand for the clients to really be able to connect with you through it.
Yeah, I struggled with that as well because, I have in there, that I'm on the search for the best bagel. And that's one of those
Mhm.
things that I love telling clients. And it's a little tidbit that, it's something about me. Some people find it funny, other
Yeah.
people, ignore it completely. But I struggled with like, it's a professional thing. I want to put my best foot forward. I want to look and be perfect. But when I think about who my perfect clients are, my ideal prospective clients, those are the people that want to know a bit more about my personality. They want to know about my search for the best bagel and want to give me some suggestions as well. So that was once I put that in there, I actually saw that and more of not only just that phrase, but really embraced more of what made me me. That's when I saw that I was getting a lot more of those ideal clients reaching out to me, and
Yeah.
which of course made the whole process better because I'm kind of skipping the line a bit and able to filter through some of those projects that aren't the best for me.
This is a great tip. I think just thinking about and trying to visualize who your ideal client is can help you really understand what you want to even show in your profile. And obviously, for everyone, it's a little bit different. Some people maybe want to put more emojis in their overview, right? Which is totally fine. But if this is not your style and you feel like this is not professional enough for you, maybe you just want to avoid things like this. Or if you want to put some hobbies in your other experiences, not everyone might be comfortable with it, but if you really feel like this is an important part of your life and you want to share that with your clients and you want to attract that type of client as well and connect through that as well, this is what you want to go for. So I guess like there's no right and wrong in terms of how you really want to organize your profile and what you want to put there. um,
Right.
so I guess that brings us to some basic tips on how to really get even started with your profile, right? And then we can go maybe section by section, at least through those that I feel are very important. And then we can talk a little bit more about the rest of the sections and how they help bring an additional dimension to your profile. So talking about getting started with your profile, first off, something that a lot of talent kind of struggles with is choosing the right experience level and primary categories under profile settings. So this is something that you want to review if you haven't set it up. But it's important in terms of search results and matching. So you want to place the primary categories that you're looking to work in profile settings, as well as the experience level. And what I mean by this is that, let's say you're new to Upwork, but you're not new to your field of expertise. You don't necessarily have to set entry level unless you feel your skill set currently is entry level. So try to kind of go for maybe intermediate or expert level. The same way you kind of set this, then you also want to make sure that you do set your profile visibility, because if your profile is private, people are not going to find you in search results. So it has to be either set to public or Upwork users only. Sometimes what happens to new user is that because, it doesn't have to even be a new user, but because of an activity, your profile can be locked private. This is nothing to be afraid of. You can just reach out to our support team and they can revert your profile back to public. So you can kind of keep showing in these search results that are so relevant. And then another thing that is pretty important for clients is obviously your availability. So you want to keep your availability up to date. Obviously, you have 3 options when you're kind of selecting your availability in case you are available. But I would always suggest that you either go for more or less than 30 hours a week, just because the third option, as you can see here on our screen, which is as needed, open to offers, can mean different things to different people. So it's always a little bit easier if you can decide on less or more than 30 hours a week. Obviously, it's not a mistake if you go for the third option, but it's always better to be a little bit clearer about how many hours a week you have to offer. And then 2 additional things that are really important that people sometimes really forget about are taking the Upwork readiness test, which you can easily access from when you log into your profile through, if you hover over Find Work, you'll see in this little drop-down menu, you'll see the option Upwork readiness test. So it's a really short test. Even if you fail it a couple of times, it's not a big deal. It's just important to complete it so that you can actually qualify for Upwork Talent badges, which then help you stand out to clients and kind of build out your reputation here at Upwork. And that said, one other thing that is really important to clients as well is that you have 100% complete profile. Sometimes this can seem a little tricky, but they're not, it's not that difficult to accomplish it. Just make sure that that you think about all the options you can kind of choose from. So it's not always that you have to add a certificate to have a complete profile. Maybe you just need to add an additional, a few additional skill tags or an additional employment history item, or maybe, an additional section such as other experiences. So try to play with it and to kind of figure out how to achieve this 100% complete profile. But obviously, if you're struggling with this, we have a Help Center article to help with it, and we will share this later on. So now that we covered these basics, I guess we can get started with the first 2 really important topics, which are profile photo and title. Just as everyone kind of guessed in their responses, these are really important things for clients. And I tried to include a couple of examples here. So just a few quick tips about selecting a profile photo. Obviously, when people start creating their profile, they want to pick something that, they want to pick a photo they already have and just put it there so they can move forward with a little bit more, some more important profile sections, such as overview, right? But do take a little time to pick a professional photo. And what that means is you want to have a photo just like maybe this one on the right side, that is with a plain background where you are smiling, looking straight into the camera. You want to crop it so it shows the top of your shoulders and your head, obviously. And you want to wear something professional. Obviously, it doesn't have to be a suit and tie, but still, you don't want to wear something that you would maybe like work out in. And then try not to use any selfies or low resolution photos, or try not to crop any group photos, which sometimes it's a pretty simple solution for us. And if you have a few photos and you can't choose which one to use, there's a great service which is free called photofeeler.com. So you can go there, you can upload your photos, and you can have people vote on how you came across. So maybe you want to come across as super professional, or you really want to come across as, a friendly person. So it depends on what your expectations are, but you can have other people share some feedback around it, and you can really pick this great profile photo for your profile. And then jumping to titles, I try to include 4 examples here. The first one that you can see, which is, do you want your service to be fast, isn't a title I would suggest using, just because you really want to share who you are and what your role is within your title. And you want to keep it kind of shorter, just because really long titles can get cut off in search results. So it's not even something the client would see. On the other hand, we have this e-commerce bookkeeping professional example, which I think is a great title. It's short, but it's very specific, right? And then there's, a title like experienced content writer that I see very often. Normally, clients, I don't think they will use words like experienced when searching. And it also doesn't tell the client so much about where what your specialty is, what it is that you really like to work with, what type of content writing do you do, right? So try not to use these generic words. And then if you look at the last title, the full stack developer one, this is a really good one because it actually highlights what your specialty is. Speaking of it, you can always format it so that it looks a little bit shorter, and do think about how you format your title, but try not to make it too long, as I said. So these are some of the examples. Obviously, these things will depend on the category you're in, but once again, try to remember that you do want to have a really precise and a really specific title that tells the client what it is that you do. Okay, and then now that we covered this, we can talk a little bit about what to do with your overview. So we spoke about these generic words or tagline type of title. It's not a mistake to use these things, but maybe you want to place them in your overview section, right? So if you want to share that you're creative or that you're experienced, or you have a really cool tagline that you think will attract the attention of a client, try to place it in your overview and see how that goes. So the first thing you want to think about when you're writing your title is that you want to focus on how you can help the client, right? So make it client focused. And sometimes talent, because they're obviously trying to represent themselves in a best way possible and share as much as they can about their experience, they talk too much about themselves. So don't just list your expertise and talk about yourself. Try to put it a little bit in a client perspective, because it is your pitch to the client, especially focusing on the first 200 characters, because these are the ones that are going to show in search results when clients kind of search for talent and see your profile photo, your title, and then the beginning of your overview. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have a super short overview or super long overview, but I don't think there is this optimal length that you should go for, because it's more about what you say in the overview rather than how long it is. But for instance, if we look at the overview that is shown here in the center on the left, this is an overview that has quite a bit of questions, just because the talent, the independent professional is trying to pitch just to attract the client. And even though this is a great way to kind of maybe start your overview or have like a question or two there, it's not just what clients want to read. Clients then want to see how you can really help them and what your skills are. And also, it's not good to put everything in one paragraph, just because it's really hard for clients to see and to quickly read through your entire overview if it's one paragraph only. So you want to organize a little bit better. One thing to definitely avoid is to use the third person singular. I do see some experts who kind of talk about themselves in third person singular, but I think it's always better to talk about yourself in first person singular, so that you can really kind of view your profile as, yourself talking to the client, right? And then when they read it, it feels a little bit more personal. And obviously, don't forget to error check. I would like to share just a few more do's related to your overview. And another great example that we can see in the next slide, which is what I think is a good profile overview example. So as you can see, it kind of it's not too short, it's not too long, and it's really well organized. It starts by kind of explaining what the independent professional's expertise is. It kind of shows, in this case, what tools they're proficient with. And then it talks a little bit more about the independent professional's vision, their additional experience, like in this case, also education, and just, some of their personal, and business values. So again, it makes it a little bit more personal, and I think it's easier for clients to connect to this particular professional here. So talking about listing and kind of organizing your overview, it's always good to include the skills that you also have in your skill tags, and we will talk about that section in just a bit. And you can mention, any tools you use or specialized software, if obviously that is relevant to your services, maybe your preferred working style, your business values, any industries or types of clients you worked with in the past. And, you can talk also about your other projects, your accomplishments, your education, but try not to take too much of the space in the overview, just because you have other sections of your profile, such as education, employment history, other experiences, where you can talk about these things. Definitely don't forget to organize your content well and to proofread it. So what I suggest is that you use grammarly.com. It's a free Chrome extension, but if you have any other way you'd like to do this, that's totally up to you. So now that we covered some tips for your profile photo, title, and overview, we can talk a little bit about skills and employment history, which I think are some of the also more important sections of your profile. First off, talking about your skills, I definitely suggest that you add all 15 skill tags there, which is currently the maximum you can have in your general profile. You can have more in your specialized profile, and this can really help you show up in relevant search results and also showcase the client what your main skills are. So again, when we talk about skill tags, it's really important to put yourself in client perspective, just because sometimes people, especially let's say in web development or maybe design and creative, like to put a lot of tools they use in the skill set, which is fine, but try to balance it out with also the type of service you provide, because not necessarily every client is familiar with this particular tool, or sometimes they don't even know this is what they're looking for. Still, if you feel like it's important for you that the client does know the tools or software they're looking to hire you to work with, then feel free to leave it there. Also, if you have more than one field of expertise, you definitely want to make sure that you list the skill tags proportionally. The order that you list them in is not relevant. But let's say you do, for example, content writing and translation. Maybe you really want to work more in content writing field and then do some translation on the side. Perhaps what you can do is you can have 10 skill tags for content writing and then maybe 5 skill tags for translation. So really try to balance this out just so that the client also understands what your focus is. And then, of course, one additional tip that I definitely suggest when it comes to skill tags is that if you don't know where to start, try to search for some inspiration, either from talent who provides similar services like you, or even better, when you apply for jobs and submit proposals, pay attention to what skill tags the clients are using in the job post. And then if you see some that are, keep repeating and you have the skill, you can actually include that in your profile. And now that we covered the skill tags, we can talk a little bit more about the employment history. I tried to include a couple of examples here based on what our independent professionals submitted. And I have just a couple of tips for you guys. So we started this topic a little bit with Neal, and it's really important to keep your employment history up to date. Sometimes people who are very experienced on Upwork and have many contracts under their work history fail to include their more recent history in the employment section as well. What I would suggest is that if you have only your independent professional business as more recent history, you at least include it as one line item and kind of summarize what your focus is. Or if you really have some larger projects that you're proud of and that you want to share, you can also list those, especially if you don't work only on Upwork and you want to showcase your additional expertise here. Also, what's really important is that you not only list your history, but that you do include some details. So a lot of times people forget to do that. Like, for example, in this case with the example on the right side where we see accountant at e-commerce company, right? Or in the last example with freelancer at JD Web Design, you do want to share some details about what your duties are, maybe some accomplishments you're really proud of, or anything else that you feel is important for that particular role. It can even be like in this first example here, the internship, which you can also include in other experiences, but it is important to share some experience and some details about it because it can really vouch for your experience. And yeah, I guess this is it when it comes to the skills and employment history. But there are a few other things that can really help make your profile more complete and add additional dimensions to it and kind of show your level of experience. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we have just a few different sections that you can decide to use if you want to. It's definitely not obligatory, but especially if you're newer to Upwork, maybe you want to request some testimonials from either clients you worked with before or your clients outside of Upwork, because this can kind of help instill the trust in your skills and expertise and really vouch for your background. Additional things that can help with the same is the certificate section. So I know that sometimes it's a little bit hard to find the certificate you have in the list Upwork recognizes, but now you can actually include also 2 custom certifications in case they're not in the list of available certificates to showcase in your profile. And then there's this section that a lot of people kind of forget about, which is called other experiences. But I feel like this section is so important and a little bit different than the rest because you have a lot of freedom about what you want to put in it. So you can put really anything that you feel highlights your skills. And this can be, volunteering or any internships that you did, or perhaps, hobbies that you have. This can sometimes be really just a great conversation starter with the client. But also if you do, if you attend different webinars, courses, if you have any additional business or experience that you want to share, this is a perfect place where you can do that. One additional section that can really be helpful is the video introduction. So this is a great way to differentiate yourself from the competition, just because not a lot of independent professionals decide to record a video introduction. So the idea behind this is really for you to share maybe like in a minute or two, a little bit more about who you are, what your business is all about, and to summarize basically everything that you put in your profile. But depending on what category you're in, you could also use this section to show maybe like an example from your portfolio or just, an example of your work. And that obviously brings us to the portfolio. So we have a good example here where our independent professional decided to place and to add 3 portfolio items. And so you want to try to have at least 3 portfolio items. Obviously, if you decide that this is relevant for your work and if the clients are asking about this, and this will kind of make your profile appear a little bit more complete and professional. Obviously, you want to keep your portfolio up to date. And if you do have a lot of examples in your portfolio, maybe every once in a while you can go in and remove some older examples, unless you obviously feel like they're a really important client or an important project that you worked on. And with that said, I'd just like to remind about something that we obviously spend a little more time talking about, but do try to create at least one specialized profile. And here's a little tip. Most people who don't have multiple fields of expertise often ask about, well, why do I need to have this specialized profile when I already have all of my skills showing in my general profile? And that's a legit question. But now that you know that you can actually appear in more search results if you have a specialized profile, well, that's one reason to create it. And then you can be even a little bit more creative with how you organize your specialized profile. So, let's say that you do bookkeeping, right? And you really specialize in QuickBooks. Well, maybe this is what you want to highlight in your specialized profile. So it can be like a tool you use or any particular style that you have, let's say if you're a designer, right? And if you have multiple fields of expertise, then try to think about what are the projects that you want to really focus on and what are the fields of expertise that you really want to work in. And this is how you kind of decide which specialized profiles you can create. And well, I guess that would be it when it comes to covering the profile reviews. I do want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who submitted them once again. And the ones that we did see here, I will reach out in a few business days via email with all of the tips. So you kind of get everything in one place in written.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nadia. And I personally was writing down a ton of notes, and I saw a lot of great questions come in. So I do want to give everyone a few more minutes to kind of gather, put together some of their questions. But beforehand, I'd love to ask all of you a question, which is, what is your key takeaway from today's event? More specifically, I think what I'm really curious about is, after hearing Nadia go through a bunch of these profiles, what is one part of your profile that you're going to be working on after today's event? So again, you could head on over to Slido to answer that question. And let's see what responses we've gotten so far. Again, you could scan this barcode over here or head over to slido.com and go to and enter the code UP10. Again, I'm really curious to learn what everyone's key takeaway is, but also what part of their profile they want to work on after this event or want to focus on after this event.
This is really great. I'm loving the responses. And I feel it's also important to kind of think about like one thing you want to focus on, because if you start thinking about like, oh, now I have to improve everything and change everything, then it seems a lot harder. And obviously everyone's really busy, so it's hard to sit down and say like, now I'll work on the entire profile. But if you kind of start by, one by one, or maybe pick like top 3 things that you want to improve in your profile, well, I think this really helps. And then you can test and see if it makes the difference, right? And it can be a great motivator to kind of keep working on your profile, and to maybe introduce this as a regular thing every few months, right?
That's actually a question that someone had asked in there, or asked via Slido. How often do you recommend revisiting your profile or updating your profile?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think it really depends on how much work you do. So if you work on maybe smaller projects, especially something that is relevant for you to showcase in your portfolio, I definitely say that like maybe every few weeks you do want to at least work on adding these portfolio items up in your portfolio. But if you have like a couple of contracts, and the work is, you have your maybe like 1-2 clients that you normally work with, logically there's not much that you can change. So you can do every few months just to maybe review and see like, is this how I would really present myself to clients? And obviously every time you decide to start looking for a new opportunity or a new client, I think it would be a great time to really sit down and think, is my profile attracting the clients that I want to work with? And start thinking about like, who's my ideal client, who I want to work with, what type of project, and is my profile really responding to that, right?
Mhm. I'm also a big notebook person. I always keep a notebook somewhere on my desk, and in there I take notes about, what I tried differently, what's working out well. But I also
Yeah,
try to keep in mind of, what kind of invites am I getting to jobs, or what prospective clients am I speaking to know, is my profile still relevant to them, or as the industry is changing, or as, the clients' needs are changing throughout the year, is that a time for me to update or change my profile as well?
exactly.
So with that, I mean, I do appreciate everyone putting in all these. I see a lot of specialized profiles, a couple of people talking about portfolios and making sure that their profiles are overall client focused. I do see a couple here which are really interesting, of adding profile videos. As you saw, that's one thing I don't have, and it's always something
Yeah,
that I'm continually thinking of and changing around, the way I think about it. Are there
yeah.
specific industries, Nadia, that you think profile videos lend more of a hand to, or that for certain categories, a profile video would really help them out?
Definitely. One category that kind of comes to my mind now that we talk about it is translation. So I feel like if you are obviously working in this industry, then a profile video can be a great way to showcase your language proficiency. So you can maybe even record it in like 2 languages, and help the client not waste their time interviewing, and you not waste your time interviewing the client that might not be looking for what you have to offer. um, Other categories that I saw people really like to post videos are, anything related to videography. So it again can showcase your skills. And I also feel like if you make and if you do some type of presentation design, this can be a great way to kind of showcase how you do it. And so you can really get creative with your profile, and doesn't with your profile video. It doesn't have to be just talking about yourself. Well, maybe you can guide the client through what your process is and what you normally do, right? Um, or just showing examples of your work, or anything related to audio, video, anything visual. And then, as I said, just showing your level, your language proficiency can be also a good. It's just a good place to do that.
Yeah, but I've also seen it done very well for, or heard it's done very well, but also seen it done well for um, people that are in administrative categories, or customer support,
Yes.
or categories where they do a lot of interaction, or face-to-face interaction of that, even if it's over video with their clients.
Mhm.
And the main feedback I heard is it's a great way to start that conversation or get that
Yes.
relationship started.
Definitely. And not talking about that category, sometimes people, especially I feel like who do virtual and administrative assistants, oftentimes put how many years of experience they have in their title as well. And so this might not be relevant for every category, but in this case, I feel it's really important. So this is something to think about. And yes, it can be a great way to show the client, just how you come across. And I feel another category that can kind of find this really beneficial is the voiceover category. So again, people can really hear what you sound like. And again, it's just another place where you can show an example of your work.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nadia. We do have some time left for Q&A. So a lot of people have already submitted questions to me on Slido, and we've gotten some comments so far about things people are interested in. So I'll definitely start asking you some of those. But first, for our audience, I'm also adding in a link to into the chat of Zoom for our feedback survey, because we'd love to know how we're doing and what we can be doing better. So if you have any suggestions for what worked really well for you, or what you think would be better for the next webinar, please definitely click on that link and fill that out. It takes about a minute. But with that, so Nadia, there's a couple of questions and a couple of places we can start. I think a lot of the reoccurring themes that I'm seeing are, first of all, how do we get a one-on-one review or assist from either you or someone else on your team?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the event, these services are currently invite only. So you might get invited, but unfortunately, there's no way at this point to request to get a one-on-one to assist with the profile. But we do have, and this is something that we can share. There is a thread within a community where you can actually submit your profile and ask for other experienced freelancers to review it and share their feedback on what you could improve. So I definitely suggest that you try to use that.
Thank you, and I'll pull that link out and throw that into the chat for
Mhm.
everyone in a moment. So there's another couple of questions here about recording of this webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It usually takes a few days for us to process it and get it back online. But if you check back next week, you can definitely, the same way that you logged into this webinar today or that you registered for the webinar, you can go ahead and see the recording of this. You can also see a bunch of the other webinars that I've done and other ambassadors have done, focusing on, just building up your profile and getting that started there. We go into more depth about proposals, and you can see that through the Upwork events page. But with that, I want to turn the mic back over to you, Nadia. So we have a couple of questions here from people that are in administrative fields or fields that can be a little more confidential. So what can they actually put on their profile and in their portfolio?
Amazing. This is such a great question. And I know that a lot of people, so, sign an NDA and they can not really show an example of their work within their profile or portfolio, but there's a couple of strategies you can use. First off, if you do have some additional time to spare, what you can do is try to kind of create sample projects. So try to kind of showcase something similar that you actually worked on, so you don't disclose any relevant information that you really cannot, or any information about the client you worked with or the project itself. But you can talk a little bit more about, for example, what your approach was, what the biggest challenges were, what in general your goals were with the project, right? And one particular template that is really helpful for this type of work and non-visual work is the case study template. So when you go to create your portfolio, this is what you can select, and you can really show off any analysis, methodology, or process you used for a particular project, and you don't need to disclose all the information. I feel like clients sometimes really just want to understand that you did work on certain projects, and they want to see what your approach and what your take on that was, so they can understand if you can really work well together, and what your process is and how you could kind of contribute to their project. Speaking of that, what you can also do, and I've heard that some clients kind of like this approach, and this is what they use Project Catalog for, is really to just understand when they see this predefined project that you created and then you're offering, they can understand a little bit better about what your process and way of work is, and they don't care so much particularly about purchasing that project, but they want to invite you to the job they posted because they can see basically how you work. So you can also do that and create maybe like a couple of types of projects that you prefer to work on, predefine them, and then you can also submit proposals by linking those or just elaborating and explaining in your proposals about what your experience is and what some similar projects were that you worked on, not necessarily sharing like a link or a PDF or an example if you really can't.
Awesome, thank you. So I think our next question here is about employment history. So Courtney asked that she's never held a job in the field that they're freelancing in right now. What should what could they put into employment history?
Well, that's a great question too. I know that a lot of people try, especially with specialized profile, to kind of make sure that everything they include in the profile is really relevant to the jobs they're looking for and to kind of the skills they basically have and the field of expertise they're looking to work in. But sometimes having this employment history is just about showing clients that you do have some type of experience, right? Especially because a lot of your soft skills come through your experience, regardless of the field you're in, right? You can also highlight very clearly for the client how many years of experience do you have in this particular field that you're currently working in and freelancing in. And I guess, it's just about showing that you did have some type of experience. You don't need to be very detailed about it, but I do suggest that you list that there, and that you do include your freelance business as this like one line item in your employment history, so they understand this type of transition that happened.
Awesome, thank you. And then we actually have a couple people that were asking about the stats you shared earlier, Nadja. So Megan in particular asked if you can repeat the percentages you stated earlier on how a specialized profile increases your odds of being discovered.
Okay, yeah, of course. So let me just get the numbers there so I don't make a mistake because all of them are just a little bit different. But what really matters is that obviously you're going to get an increase in invites, interviews, and offers. So the numbers were, and let's look at them. So yeah, there's a 33% increase in invites, a 31% increase in interview requests, and a 9% increase in offers overall, right? So this depends again on the categories, your reputation, etc. So there's a lot of factors that go into this, but this is some average numbers that we have.
Awesome, thank you. And then, so looking through there, we still have a lot of questions coming in. Please feel free to keep them coming. The conversation stop at the end of this webinar, so please head over to, I actually posted in the community thread with some of the resources that we've talked about today. And so you can head over and find that post. I'll actually post a link to that as well in the chat. And then if you do have other questions, you're more than welcome to send them there. We do have a couple people asking questions that are very specific to their profiles. I'd recommend that for any of those, definitely head over to Upwork support. They're there to help, and they are a tremendous help all the time. And so if you do have questions that are very specific to you, we're not going to talk about on this webinar today, but I would recommend that Upwork support will be able to help you out there. So with that, we do have a couple of last questions, Nadia, for you. So um, do you have any recommendations for agency profiles?
Um, well, I can be very frank. In terms of success partner services, we don't really work with agencies. We used to work, but these were just a few ones with agency owners. So again, we would focus on the independent professional profiles. But I do feel like there's a couple of, just because the agency profiles do look a little bit different than the independent professional ones, you can still try to be very client focused, showcase all of the fields and services you can offer. And what I would focus on in terms of agencies is really what your process and way of working is. So including, relevant examples, portfolio, talking about how you work. And what I feel in terms of agencies is really relevant is for clients to understand who they will communicate with, who is doing what. So kind of introducing also your agency members there.
Thank you.
The same goes, sorry, just to add to that, the same goes if you do work with an agency and you share this in your independent professional profile, that is totally fine. But do try to be clear about what skills you have and what type of work you do versus what your agency does and what services they provide. So clients kind of can understand what the difference is there.
Thank you. So this is a very relevant question for this person said that, the real question boils down to from Chris is how do they tell if their profile is 100% complete? Is there a way to
Yeah.
find that out?
Yes. So it's a great question when you basically log into your profile where you see, so you have this find work page. On the right side below my profile, you actually have a profile completion percentage, and it will show what percentage it is. And sometimes if it's not complete, so if it's not 100% complete, it can actually show little prompts of what you could do to make it complete. But as I said, let's say your profile is 95% complete, it shows 5% to add a certification. You don't have to add a certification. You can just go and maybe add additional section or like link a social account to your profile. So there are other ways to actually make your profile complete, and you can use the link that we shared to figure it out.
Awesome. Thank you. And so I think we have time for one or two more questions.
Sure.
So I think these last two are actually pretty relevant. So Ezekiel says that he works in two very different areas. What's the best way to organize their profile?
Definitely specialized profiles. So with these types of independent professionals who do have very different fields of expertise, specialized profiles are probably the best way to showcase this different skill set and different field of expertise, just because you can use each of them to kind of showcase all the different projects that you worked on, your different maybe employment history, different portfolio examples, different skills, right? And then your general profile can show both. And just what you want to make sure is that you very clearly kind of separate the fields that you have. So what I see sometimes, it doesn't mean that you have to do this, but I find it very helpful is when people who have different fields of expertise who are super different, they organize their profile overview so that they kind of highlight their experience and skill set with one field of expertise, maybe even like a little title to it, and then they kind of separate it, and then they have a different paragraph for a different field of expertise. And then like if they have three fields of expertise, they'll add the third paragraph. So it's very easy to kind of understand, and you don't have to basically even read everything if you're not interested in, let's say you do logo design and voiceover. Like I'm not looking for a logo designer, I'm only interested in your skills as a voiceover artist. Well, I'll just read that little paragraph and kind of figure out how you can help me with that.
Awesome. And would you recommend the same thing for Antonia, who has roughly 10 years of experience as business operations? but also has an accounting degree and does bookkeeping. Would you recommend a similar strategy and approach?
Yeah, so I see that Antonia is actually worried about her profile maybe being a little bit confusing to clients. So as I said, it's the same strategy. You just want to really make it clear what are your experiences related to business operations, and then what are your experiences related to accounting and bookkeeping. And then definitely you want to have two specialized profiles in this case, but it's also up to what you're most interested in. Do you want to work both with business operations and accounting and bookkeeping, or maybe you're not as excited about working, let's say, with bookkeeping, and you really want to focus your business on business operations? Well, then this is what you want to highlight in your overview, in your skill tags, and be very frank and open to say that, to put this in the profile so the clients understand it and say, this is what I focused on, but here's also the additional skill set I have, and this is also my experience, and this is how I could help you, obviously, if need be. So it's totally up to you how you decide to organize it, but I do suggest using specialized profiles.
And then we do have one other quick question here of, is it necessary to include certifications?
Great question. No, it's not. If you don't have them, you can still be very successful in Upwork, and you can still have a complete profile without the certifications. But if you do have them, it's really good to show them, especially if they're related to your skills.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Nadja, and thank you to everyone that submitted their proposals to get them reviewed. I know that we didn't get to everyone's profile that wanted to be reviewed. So if you do want to have your profile reviewed in some capacity, I would definitely head over to the Upwork community. Again, I will drop the link with there's a lot of a lot of resources that we have today, with a lot of different links. One of them is to get your profile reviewed through the community thread. And that is, if you are a new freelancer, or if you're a freelancer who's looking for your profile to get reviewed, you can definitely post there. But also, if you're a more experienced freelancer, or a freelancer who's been using Upwork for a little bit of time and may have some advice to give, I would definitely also recommend heading over to that community thread and seeing if you can give a few freelancers some good advice or some constructive criticism. So again, I'll drop a link which has a post in the community thread of all these resources here. I'll post that in the chat right now. And then again, you could head over there to click the links to see all these different resources. Again, if there's also a couple blogs here and a couple of other webinars that you could check out. One of these is the webinar recording of the Winning Profiles webinar. We did have a lot of questions today from folks who were interested in learning about proposals, and also interested in learning about some other areas like project catalogs and other things. So there's other Upwork ambassadors like Kata, who did a really fantastic webinar recently on project catalogs. So I definitely recommend checking that out. I would also recommend checking out for proposals. There was a bunch of proposal webinars that we've done recently. You can always check out mine, which may be my favorite, but there's also plenty of other ambassadors who have done them. And also you can always check out the most recent one. And for that, you can head over to the Upwork events page, and there's links to all those events. And similarly, on that page, you can find the recording to this webinar. Again, I would probably next week, since it's getting close to Friday already. But otherwise, it usually takes us a few days to get this recording up there. With that, Nadja, do you have any last thoughts or tips to share with everyone?
No, I think we covered everything, especially with the questions that were so amazing. So we could have got to tackle some of the topics a little bit more. But yeah, I do invite everyone to go to the events page and just kind of browse through past events and kind of see what's also coming, especially if you're interested in topics like project catalog and proposals.
Awesome, thank you. The one last tip I'll leave with everyone is something that you had mentioned pretty early on in this webinar, Nadia, and that is to do what's best for you or your brand. And so we've shared a lot of tips, a lot of best practices, and a lot of ideas throughout this webinar. But the one thing you should always keep in mind is that you're the one that knows your freelance business the best. So make sure to take these as what they are, which are suggestions and ideas, and to enact or to try the things that really work best for you. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. I know we do have a couple of other questions that are still coming in. Feel free to head over to the Upwork community and you can ask them there in that thread. And the Upwork community team is standing by to help answer some of those questions. And I'll also check in later today to try to answer some of those questions as well. So with that, thank you, Nadia, again, and thank you to everyone that submitted their profiles for reviews. Happy freelancing, and I'll see you on a webinar soon.
Thank you, Neal.